y'all, it's Taylor here again for another video, and in today's video I thought that because October is Meet the Blind Month or Blindness Awareness Month that I would share with you guys the super heavily guarded story about myself and my journey with my blindness, how I went blind, can my vision be cured, everything in between. So if you like this video, please give me a subscribe, leave me a comment, a like, share it, all the things. Let's get into it. I was born in a cabin in the woods. It was a dark and dreary Hallows Eve night when my mother was attacked by a werewolf. Just kidding. My mom actually had a really normal pregnancy with me. They had a little bit of concern about her gaining weight, and a couple of rude nurses were like, "Are you eating enough? Are you sure?" Like, blah, 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 just giving her a really hard time about it. But other than that, no one had any suspicion or inkling that anything could possibly be wrong with me, my eyes, my mom, anything. Everything was totally golden until my mom went into labor. So she was taking the contractions one hit at a time, just hanging out. She was in really good spirits when the first nurse that was working with her came in, and she's like, "Hey, I'm just here to check all your monitors and everything, do some adjustments, switch your position." My mom's like, "Cool, no problem." So they do all of that. The nurse leaves. My mom's hanging out with her sister and everything. Well, then all of a sudden, an entire team of nurses just swarms my mom's labor room. Like, my mom said it was probably like 10 plus people just all at once coming in. And they start talking about how they have to move her to the OR right now because my heart rate was dropping significantly fast, and that if they didn't, I was going to die. So that is literally what happened. My mom says she remembers a nurse yelling that Dr. Harris was going to be there in 2 minutes and that she was scared, and she kept asking, like, what's going on, what's happening, all these questions, but they really just didn't have time to answer her. They had to put her to sleep basically immediately, and she really doesn't remember much more after that until she woke up. And when she woke up, she got to see me for like the briefest of moments, and then we were separated because I was super, super sick. And we found out at that point that I was born with a virus called cyclomegalovirus, which is not just strictly a common cold. You can get it any way that you can get bodily fluids. So if you touch a counter and someone who coughed or sneezed had also touched that counter and they were carrying cyclomegalovirus, you could get that no matter what. It basically can be transferred through any bodily fluid, stuff like that, but there's no predicting. You can't really prepare yourself not to get it. It's just anywhere that there are bodily fluids. But the way that I usually explain it to people is that it's kind of like a version of the common cold, because most people would never ever know that they had it because you just have cold-like symptoms. And most people get cyclomegalovirus when they're a young child, like in preschool or daycare age, and you would never know that you had it. So in my mom's case, though, at some point she picked it up during her pregnancy and no one knew. It wasn't tested for or anything like that. It's just something that happened, and no one knew that I was sick until I was born. And they knew that something was wrong with my eyes, but the hospital that I was at couldn't really test me. They didn't really have answers. They knew that I was very sick. I was very small. I was only 5 pounds, 14 ounces when I was born, and I was full term. I wasn't born early or anything. I just wasn't getting all the nutrients and things I needed, probably because of the virus. And there's just nothing that my mom couldn't have changed it. The doctors couldn't have changed it. I think it's more common for them to test for it now, but at the time, like, there's no fault on anyone. It's just what happened to me. So my mom and I were separated because I had to go to a completely different hospital that could better take care of me while I was sick. And my mom had to stay where she was because she had a super, invasive surgery, a C-section, and it was considered like an emergency. So I'm sure they did a great job, but it also meant like things were very rushed and everything. So she had to recover before she could come and see me. And they told my parents that I was blind. They thought that I was totally blind. They didn't even know where to start with what would possibly and could possibly be wrong with me. So over time, I was put in an incubator. They started giving me like medicine and all kinds of things. They found out that originally they thought I was totally blind. And what happened was that my grandpa and a few other people were in the room with me and the lights were off. But when they turned the lights on, I jumped and reacted to the lights. So then they decided, okay, well, she's not totally blind. And they started doing more investigating and more testing. And when I was 3 hours old, I had my first cornea transplant, which is where they take the outermost layer of your eye, it's a clear layer, and they replace it. And I can't tell you a ton about it because I'm not a doctor, but I know that your cornea is your outermost layer, and they were replacing this cornea to try to save my eye because it had ruptured already. But a few days later, I had another cornea transplant, which was to hopefully give me more vision and to be able to see more clearly through my eyes. And although I was very sick and had a hard time gaining weight and stuff like that, I was very fortunate to not really have any other problems from the cyclomegalovirus. I was still very sick with it though, so my parents opted to have me given a medicine called ganciclovir, which was pretty new at the time. And it wasn't like it was FDA approved, but it wasn't really widely used yet. So there was a lot of skepticism about giving me this medication so young. And my parents chose to do it because it was going to be the best chance that I had of getting healthy and having as little effects from the virus as possible. So they chose to do that. And it was a good choice because they put a port into my heart that my parents had to, well, my mother had to like clean and change out for me at home because I was in the hospital for a few months. But once I came home, like my mom still had to change out all that tubing and stuff. And she said it was very scary to have to mess with a port that was like connected to my heart. But the medicine was super important. So, of course, she did it. But I can imagine that being a lot of pressure. Um, and when I was around 2, I completely shed the virus. And at that point, I was considered very healthy, very normal, except that I was blind. And at this point, I had light perception and movement in my left eye. And I can't give you like an exact number, but I definitely had decent vision in my right eye. Not like 20/20 or anything, but good enough that I could like run around and I could play and watch TV and look at regular print books and stuff like that if they were close to my face, without like the help of glasses because my vision wasn't correctable with glasses. But I did have a good bit of vision as a child. And that's sort of the early stages. I had to go to tons of doctor's appointments. My parents were constantly giving me eye drops, and it was a long journey of just trying to keep my eyes as stable as possible. Over time, I developed glaucoma, which is where your eyes have high pressure in them. So you have fluid in your eyes, and when the pressure is high, it means you have like too much fluid. Your eyes get like very firm and it can be very painful. And it also causes you to see sort of like through a tunnel. To me, it doesn't look like, or it didn't look like I saw through a tunnel, but that's what it does. And I've never seen anything different, so I guess I wouldn't really know what it's like to not see through a, you know, invisible tunnel. But that's what glaucoma does. And I would say that for the most part, the biggest struggle was controlling my eye pressure. Once I started to get into my preteen years, my vision kind of started to decline. It was very, very slow, so slow that I didn't even really notice a difference. I think like my mom and my family could tell more of a difference than I could until when I was 15 or 16. We finally decided, okay, it's time to try another cornea transplant. And 15 to 16 years with the same cornea is very rare because the younger you are, the more likely it is that your body will reject something foreign, and a cornea is something foreign to your body. So the fact that I was able to hold on to that same cornea for 15 to 16 years is kind of like a blessing. And it's crazy because it's not very common. They told my parents that I'd have to have multiple transplants because my eyes would just keep rejecting them. And I was lucky that that didn't happen to me. So we did switch to a new cornea when I was 15 or 16. And this was the first time that I really remember seeing clear. Like, I remember after that surgery looking at leaves like from far away and just, I couldn't see like tiny details that were on a leaf that I would see up close, but I was like looking at trees and seeing the definition. Like, I could tell that they weren't just all one green blob. And it was just so literally like amazing to me. It was like someone had taken this horrible film off of my eyes, and now I was seeing so much contrast. There was so much detail. Everything was so vibrant and clear. It was amazing. Like, I don't want to sound dramatic, but it was super amazing. I just remember like looking at all kinds of random things because my mind at the time was just blown. And that cornea held on for a little while, but unfortunately, it kind of became a pattern of holding on to a cornea for a year or so, and then it would fail. And then we'd go through the same surgery, the same process. We'd try different medicines, steroids, all kind of things in hopes of keeping the cornea healthy, but ultimately they would just keep failing. And I never really feel like I saw as clear as I did after that one until I think I was like 20 when I had another cornea transplant. And I think because there had been so much time between my previous one and that one because I was pregnant with my oldest daughter. So I chose to like wait a while in between. And I think because I waited so much time that when I had this surgery, once again, it was super vibrant, super clear, just mind-boggling. I remember looking at an area rug that had all kinds of geometric shapes and squares on it and just being like, whoa, because it was just crazy. And when they took um the patch off of my eye the next day, my daughter, she was like a baby at the time, Braylee, she was sitting in her car seat in the floor, and I just remember looking at her. She had on her little baby glasses, and I remember looking at her, and she was just so cute. And I had seen her, like, I had enough vision that I could see her a little bit, and I had seen her in pictures, of course, but her face was just so clear and so vibrant at the time. It really was like that moment in the movies or like that people try to recreate and stuff. For me, it really was like that. Um, so I held on to that cornea for a while, and eventually I just started getting like eye infections. The cornea failed. I had tubes in my eyes from my glaucoma where the pressure was needing to be controlled with tubes, and those had to be removed because I had had them for so many years. And my glaucoma got out of control, and it just became another whirlwind of cornea transplants and medications and all kinds of stuff. So eventually, I had my last cornea transplant, and I had hoped that it was going to go really well. And honestly, after I woke up well, I woke up that day, but after I woke up and we took the patch off of my eye the next day, there really wasn't any difference. I had a little bit more pain than I normally had, but I really did not see much differently than I did before the surgery. So at that point, the cornea was just considered like, okay, it's healthy, but you didn't really get any vision back. So at this point in my life, I haven't had another cornea transplant in mm, probably 7 years. And part of me really wants to have another one to see, but it's kind of like I'm not a doctor and it's up to the doctors and what they would want to do. But the other part of me is conflicted because right now, although I'm considered medically blind at this point, I still see some things. So the way I can best describe my vision is when you get out of the shower and you look at a mirror and how it's just completely fogged over. That's kind of what my eyes are like. Or if you took up a piece of parchment paper and put it over your eyes, that's literally what my vision looks like. Um, I don't really see any detail. I can see colors sometimes, I can see movement, I can see light and things like that, but I don't really have any usable vision. When I was younger, I didn't have to use a cane or a guide dog or anything like that. Now I have to use a cane everywhere that I haven't memorized. Like my house, like I don't use a cane at my house, but my home, my family's home, I can walk around without a cane because I've been there so many times. But to leave the house, I fully have to have a cane. I can't read tiny print like I could when I was little. It's all, you know, braille or electronically getting information, things like that. And that's definitely been a huge adjustment. Some blind people will tell you they're totally happy being blind. Um, I am more than happy to share that I would take my vision back in a heartbeat. I wouldn't like sacrifice like my kids or my husband or my family or anything to get it back, but I would literally do almost anything to get my vision back because like I hate missing out on like physically seeing my kids or physically seeing my kids learn to walk, or when my kids color a picture, them handing it to me and being like, look mom, and I'm like, oh, tell me about it. And that's fine. Like it's definitely an adjustment, but I still have a great quality of life. I'm really happy in my life and I'm happy as a mom, and being blind doesn't really change a ton of like who I am, but it definitely has shaped my life and it definitely changes the way that I do things and go about things. As far as if there's any way to cure my vision, there's always the chance that if I had another cornea transplant, I would get more vision. And there's also another type of cornea called a K-Pro, or I'm not even gonna try to pronounce it for you guys. We're just gonna call it a K-Pro. But there's a really big fancy word for what it is, but it's a prosthetic cornea that takes real cornea tissue with made tissue is how I understand it. And for some people, it works way better than a standard cornea. And that is an option for me more than likely. But the problem with that is that I also kind of have uncontrolled glaucoma. So one minute my glaucoma will be doing really well, and then the next moment I'll have very high glaucoma. And it's already hard to get a really accurate read on my cornea and my glaucoma because of how many surgeries I have had. At this point, I've had somewhere between 8 and 10. I couldn't even tell you the exact number at this point, but I've had somewhere between 8 and 10. It could be a bit more or a bit less. But I have had a lot of them, and the more you have, the harder it is to hold on to that cornea. So all of those factors come together to say that there are technically options that could help my vision, but there's not really anything. I can't wear glasses, I can't take a medicine or take eye drops or go in and have a laser surgery or anything like that to get automatically cured vision. And even the options I have at this point in my life may not do anything. I could have one or both of those surgeries and come out seeing less or come out with more or stay the exact same. So for that reason, I haven't really moved in to do any of it. It's a really hard decision for me. I would really like to try a regular cornea personally, just because of how long I've gone between surgeries, and see how that goes. But because I've had so many, like, the doctors I've talked to aren't like super on board with it because they feel like it'll just reject like the others. And that's a possibility, but for me as the blind person in the situation, even if I get to see better for 1 or 2 more years, that's 1 or 2 more years of vision that I don't have right now. So to me, that's a no-brainer. I would take it no matter how long or how short the cornea was going to last. The other option, the K-Pro, I'm very curious about it. I'm very open to the idea, but with the fact that my glaucoma is uncontrolled and the K-Pro can make it way harder to sort of see what's going on with that glaucoma, so it could get way worse before we even know it. That's kind of scary to me. Because if there's anything that's really going to continuously take my vision away at this point, it's the glaucoma getting out of control. And that would basically result in, okay, I have a healthy cornea, but my glaucoma has done so much damage at this point that a cornea won't give me vision. So that's a really big conflict for me. If anyone has any thoughts about what they would do in that situation, obviously it's a decision that everyone has to make for themselves, but I'd be really curious to see what other people think they would do. I like hearing other people's thoughts and opinions, and you guys might bring up a thought or opinion that I haven't really considered yet. So if you have anything to share or you've gone through a similar experience, please let me know in the comments. At this point, that's really where I am. I take eye drops for my pressure. Sometimes I get little infections in my eyes and abrasions, and we have to do like an antibiotic. I have a really hard time keeping moisture in my eyes, which can cause them to be really like itchy and dry. And although it seems impossible, make my vision even more blurry than it already is. So it's a lot of just managing and maintaining at this point. And that's basically the story of me and my eyes and all the good things, bad things, and scary things about it. But I would love to hear what your eye conditions are if you have one, and just your thoughts if you like this video. And I hope that you will please subscribe, leave me a comment, a like, and I'll see you guys in the next video.